Army Air Force, Army Air Corps. I grew up in a little town about 60 miles east of Reno called Fallon, Nevada, an agricultural community. Went through elementary and high school there. I stayed out of high school about a year before I went off to college, which was the University of Nevada in Reno. I was about 19 when I went to enroll at university. I was about to be drafted. My draft number was about to be called up from my local draft board, and myself and several others in my class, we all decided we'd rather choose the service we're going to enter. So we went off down to Sacramento, California, to Mather Field, and took the entrance exam and physical for the Army Air Corps. They told us, we'll go back to school, whatever you're doing, and we'll call you up when we're ready. And this kind of surprised us. Well, they said, frankly, we just don't have the training facilities and training planes to train you yet, but we're building up rapidly, and when we're ready, we'll call you. So it turns out that the Army Air Corps was getting a little bit criticism from us because they were letting these guys sign up and go back to school, whatever they were doing, and other poor devils were being drafted and sent right overseas into combat. And so they decided they better do something about that. So they all of a sudden they called us all up. Actually, I'd finished the first semester and I started the second semester. It was about February of 1943 when I got my call. And a whole bunch of other fellows, we all got the call at the same time. We thought, gee, they make some kind of mistake, because they told us we probably would be called up for months. And no, they had a plan. They called us up, and after putting us through a month of boot training, they sent us back to colleges under what they called college training detachments, where we would take courses pertinent to our later careers in the Army Air Corps. Mathematics, navigation, weather, map reading, anything like that, and of course rigid calisthenics, physical training courses. This boot training we took first, we were sent to Lincoln, Nebraska, which was an aviation mechanics school. They weren't even ready for us there. We came in on a train, and from the west, most of the fellows on that train had come from up from Southern California, the local area right around here, and were dressed in light clothing, which is typical of this climate. We got into there in the middle of winter, and wind coming down off of the plains. It was just bitterly cold. And as we marched into that base in our civvies, other guys that had already been there for a few days and still in their civvies were yelling at us, "You'll be sorry, you won't like it here." Well, it turns out that they really weren't ready for us. They didn't have the uniforms, and we had to stay in our civvies for a couple of weeks there. And yet we had to do everything that was required of us. We had to get up in the morning and go to breakfast at the mess hall, and about 5 o'clock in the morning, wasn't even light yet, dead of winter, cold wind blowing. We'd be standing there in lines outside the mess hall, waiting for our turn to come in. And gosh, guys were coming, dropping right and left with illnesses, bronchitis, pneumonia, whatnot. If you wanted to go on sick call, you had to march in formation clear over to the far corner of the base and to go to the local base hospital. Well, finally our uniforms did come in, and we went through the quartermaster warehouse and were issued our uniforms, and we completed our boot training there, and then we boarded another train, and I was sent to Montana State College up in Bozeman, Montana, for what they called college training detachments. I was hoping to go back to University of Nevada, where my fiance had enrolled with me and was still going to school, and that would have been delightful if I could have been sent there, but no such luck. There was a group of cadets that did go there, but I wasn't in that group. I was sent to Montana State. And that program was supposed to last about 5 months. In the last month we would get a flight experience in a Cub type aircraft, a Porterfield or Taylorcraft airplane. But to get the ball rolling, they divided us into 5 groups, and those of us that scored the highest on the general intelligence test that we'd been given when we first went through boot training, we only got 1 month there. The next group got 2 months and so forth till they got the program rolling. We did get our flight experience, and then we were sent off from there to the next base, which was down in Southern California, Santa Ana Army Air Base, a huge base. There was no flying done there. It was just strictly a classification and pre-flight center. We were given batteries of tests, motor aptitude tests, and written tests to determine whether we had the qualifications to be, or the potential to be a pilot, or we'd be better as a navigator or bombardier, or none of the above, in which case we would probably end up as the aerial gunners. And even if sometimes it wouldn't even be for some physical defect or something, we might not even be qualified there. And a friend of mine from my hometown was washed out right there in a physical. I think it was his eyesight, and he was sent. Turned out to be pretty good for him because he was sent into a group that was put back to school to study radar, which was just coming on the horizon at that time, and he got a very intensive background in radar. But I was classified as pilot material, and the second month we were there, we were given ground school training and again in Morse code and aircraft recognition, weather, map reading, things like that. And we also got a very intensive drill in close order drill and calisthenics. About half the day would be out on the field doing calisthenics or marching, and the other half would be in the buildings going through ground school. There was about 20,000 aviation cadets there at any one time. There would be two overlapping classes. Each month, one class would leave and a new class would come in. So I was in class of 44C, which means that I would eventually get my wings in 1944, and C represented the March, the third month of the year. So we were sent off to, a group of us were sent off to Ryan School of Aeronautics in Hemet from there, where we got our primary flight training. And this was done in a Ryan PT-22, a little low-wing monoplane aircraft. And this was strictly a civilian flying school. My instructor, William Bader, his name was, actually operated a furniture store in the city of Hemet. And this was a beautiful community to fly over. They had all the fields, farmers' fields around there that we'd come down at low level and make our figure eights and patterns over those fields, or the instructor might pull a forced landing on us and suddenly chop the throttle. Okay, forced landing, pick a field. And I soloed after about 10 hours. We did most of our practice takeoffs and landings out at auxiliary fields away from the main field. And that was kind of a surprise. Sometimes you'd come in after dual instruction with the instructor, and he'd climb out of the airplane and say, okay, I think you're ready to solo. Go ahead, take it around. So it wasn't too hard to get the airplane off the ground once you got up there and flew around the traffic pattern. Okay, I've got to get this thing down. How am I going to do that? So you gradually come down and, a little too high, so you pop the stick, a little lower, a little lower. Finally you touch down, and gosh, I did it. So when you came in back to the barracks, we had nice little barracks. It was almost like a country club. We had little cubicles where it was kind of like a little duplex with the bathroom in between two wings, and there'd be I think there was about 4 cadets on each side, about 8 cadets altogether shared in this little room. So we'd come back after the day we soloed, and they'd turn the fire hydrant on us and initiate us into those who had soloed. We got about 65 hours of flight training there, and then we were off to our next base, which is basic flight training. And I was sent to Gardner Field in Taft, which is just west of Bakersfield, for that training. And there we flew the multi-vibrator, the BT-13. And again, we got about the same amount of hours, about another 65 hours of training in this plane, and we got exposed to night flying, night landings and takeoffs, and night navigation, and under the hood instrument training. From there, about the time we were there, we were asked whether we would prefer to fly single-engine aircraft, typically fighter planes, or we'd rather go into multi-engine aircraft, such as the twin-engine or 4-engine bombers, and I chose the latter. So this determined the type of advanced flying school we'd go to, and I went to a multi-engine advanced school, which was, we flew in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, and we flew the AT-17, affectionately known as the Bamboo Bomber there, the Cessna Bobcat. And we got further instrument training there, and you always flew these planes dually. There was always either an instructor or student, another student would go up together in the pilot and co-pilot seats. You needed a person on the right seat to look around and make sure when you're for instance, if you're going to make a right turn, if it was all clear to do so, you'd always have him look out, say clear right, yeah, clear right, okay, we can make a right turn. And we did our instrument flying by putting typically we'd wear colored goggles, like a red goggles, and we'd put a green screen, transparent screen around the cockpit windows. That way the co-pilot could still see through the colored screen, but wearing the red glasses against the green screen, it was just strictly black, and all you could see was the instruments. And so that's how we did our instrument training, both first with an instructor, and then we could practice as student with another student. Got a little formation training, light training there, and a long-range navigation training. We had to make a solo flight, yourself and another student, up to Wichita, Kansas. Stayed overnight up there and flew back the next day. So after about two or 2.5 months training there, we were ready to graduate and get our wings and commission. And I graduated, and my mother came all the way from Fallon, Nevada, my hometown, to see me graduate and get my wings. And when we graduated there, we were given a choice of the type of aircraft we'd like to fly in combat. And I'd chosen, my first choice was the B-25 twin-engine bomber, the B-25 Mitchell. And the second choice was the P-38 twin-engine fighter plane. I think the third choice would have been one of the cargo-type planes, the C-46 or C-47. But apparently there weren't enough openings coming through for those schools, and those of us that didn't get our choice of what we wanted to fly, we were sent out as co-pilots on either B-17s or B-24, and I drew the B-24. I wasn't particularly happy about it. I'd rather have been a first pilot and gone through first pilot transition school, but I had to get all my experience at flying the B-24 from primarily from our first pilot, who had gone through 2 or 2.5 months of first pilot training. He got his at Kirtland Field, Albuquerque, New Mexico. I went home for about 2-week leave, and then was told to go to Hammer Field, which is in Fresno. My orders shipped me to Hammer Field, and they were assembling crews, 10-man crews, to man these B-24 bombers there. We didn't do any flying there again. We were just put up in barracks each week, and we'd report, and finally they compiled lists of people that would form these 10-man crews. The 4 officer members, the pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and bombardier, and the 6 enlisted men, which would be a radio operator gunner, a flight engineer gunner, a nose turret gunner, a tail gunner, ball turret gunner, and waist gunner. Our crew was assembled there, and we were sent to Muroc Army Air Base, which is located in the Antelope Valley, in close proximity to where the present Edwards Air Force Base is located. And here again, we got about 2.5 months training as a crew. We learned to operate as a crew. We got gunnery training, aerial gunnery. Our gunners would fire at a target being towed by another plane, typically a B-26, and many of these B-26s were being flown by WASPs, Women's Air Service pilots. It was kind of risky, believe it or not. A lot of times we'd seldom get any bullet holes in the tow target. We'd darn near shoot the B-26 down sometimes. And we got a low-level strafing, which we didn't do much actually in combat in that type of aircraft, but we did a little of that. And we did night navigation training, a lot of formation training. We made simulated bomb runs and group formations over the city of Los Angeles. And what else? instrument calibration flights. So we finally were ready to ship out from there, and went on to, we were sent up to Hamilton Field north of San Francisco, and we were given a brand new B-24 right off the assembly line. We thought maybe this would be our permanent aircraft, but it wasn't to be. We were just going to ferry this airplane across the ocean. We didn't know where initially. We didn't know whether we were going to go to the European theater or to the Asiatic Pacific theater. We took this airplane up and with bomb bay tanks in it for extra fuel capacity, and practiced fuel transfer. We flew up and down the length of California, up and down the Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys, practicing fuel transfer. And then we landed in Fairfield, Suisun Field, which is located between Sacramento and San Francisco. From there, we were briefed on our flight overseas, in which we didn't know at that time where it was going to be, but it was to Hickam Field in Honolulu. Long overwater flight, which required fuel transfer from those belly tanks. I think this mission took us about 15 hours, and it was our first real experience of long-range navigation flying for our navigator. And to assist us, they did have a couple of ships located at the 1/3 and 2/3 points across that gap. We could put our radio direction finder on, just as a little self-assurance that we were on the right track. And with our radio compass, we could pick up on those ships. But we were flying in daylight. Our navigator mostly took sun shots with his sextant from through the astrodome to keep us on course. And we hit it. We came right into Hickam Field, and we even had to go through, even though this was now 44, summer of 44, long after Pearl Harbor, they were still very skittish about possible air raids and attacks, and we had to go through special maneuvers that they could pick up on radar. As we approached Hickam Field, we had to make a couple of big 360-degree turns and waggle our wings a couple of times and say we're friendly, and of course we had what they call the IFF, identification friend or foe, that would answer back to the radar waves that they were sending to pick us up, that were friendly. When we landed in Hickam Field, we were our prop governor and one of the engines had gone out, and we had to stay a couple of days there while the rest of the crews had flown on to the next island, and we had to have that governor changed. And meantime, we all went to Waikiki Beach and laid out there and took a lot of sun, and we weren't too careful about it. We got it overexposed, and most of us got terrific sunburns, and the rest of the way across the ocean we were rubbing suntan oil on each other's backs. But our next stop was the little island of Canton Island, and then from there we went to Guadalcanal, which was then well behind the front lines, and was a safe place to land. And from there we went to Townsville, Australia, where we gave up this brand new airplane that we had been assigned. And we stayed there a week or so, and then we boarded an Australian troop ship, and for a 2-day voyage up along the coast of Australia, the east coast of Australia, up toward Port Moresby, New Guinea. And we were put into a truncheon camp there where newly arrived crews were waiting for assignment to specific bomb groups. And we were eventually assigned to the 5th Bomb Group in the 13th Air Force, which was at that time located in the Admiralty Islands, Los Negros Island specifically. The group had been bombing islands up in the Central Pacific from there, long-range missions, 1,000 miles each way up and back, and far beyond fighter escort, islands like Truk and Yap and Woliai. And they'd had quite heavy losses over those islands, and as soon as they got in the Japanese fighter range, they were picked up by Japanese fighters, and they had to fight their way in and fight their way out on those targets. And fortunately for us, they were through on those missions and getting ready for the next move up to the next station, so we missed out on some of those fun trips. And the next station was to the little island of Watki, just off the coast of New Guinea, up close to the island of Hollandia, or not the island, the coastal city of Hollandia. And this was just a very small postage stamp size island that the airfield ran the length of the island, and there was barely enough room to park the airplanes and tents where we were put up. And when a lot of the tents you generally get blown down in the morning when the crew chiefs were out there warming up the engines for the day's missions. The prime target from that post was the Palau Islands to the east of the Philippines. The Armed Forces felt it was necessary to take those islands prior to the landings in the Philippines. It was quite a heavy Japanese stronghold. And we encountered not so much fighter interception, but we did encounter a heavy aircraft flak on the two missions that our crew personally flew up there, softening up those islands for the Marine and Army invasion that followed later. The next op was up to, we packed up again, and again, when we made these moves, we just threw our tents and tent poles and everything and personal belongings in the waist section of the airplane and used the B-24 bombers as a cargo plane to fly up to our next station. We did have a ship that carried all the heavy equipment, such as refrigeration equipment for our mess halls and everything, but from the next 2 or 3 moves from that, they never caught up with us. We made so many island hopping moves that we just carried everything that we could put in the airplanes between the stations. Our next stop was to Nomfor Island. We got there, that's located in Gilving Bay on the north coast of New Guinea. And we got there just after they'd had a terrific downpour of rain. And first thing we noticed is Tokyo Rose came on and welcomed the 5th Bomb Group to Nomfor Island. How do you like the mud, boys? So the primary target from Nomfor Island was to bomb a huge Japanese-held oil refinery called at Balikpapan on the east coast of Borneo. And this would become the longest-range mission ever flown by B-24s, even longer than the famous Ploesti raid in Romania in the European theater. It was over 2,500 miles round trip. And again, it was the initial missions were beyond the range of fighter cover, and which we were expected heavy fighter interception when we got near that target. And there was also heavy anti-aircraft fire, so the first missions were flown at quite high altitude. I think it was around 18 to 20,000 feet. We didn't go on the first 2 missions, and the group did suffer quite heavy losses on those first 2 missions. We went on. I think we went on the 3rd mission, but it happened to be a turn back. We were almost to the target, and we lost one of our engines due to mechanical failure. We lost oil pressure and had to turn back and come back to another island, Morotai, which was going to become our next base. But it was had just been taken by ground forces, and when we landed there one night, we spent the whole night in the foxhole and could see tracers overhead of our anti-aircraft guns shooting at Japanese planes that they were bombing the airfield there. They were really not fully secured at that time. And we, after some hasty repairs on, I don't think, actually we didn't fly back on that. I think we flew back by another type of cargo plane or something back to our base. They had to repair our plane. It actually needed not only the engine that had gone out, but all the other engines since it had been pulling heavy power settings all the way back from Borneo. I think they had to replace all 4 engines on that airplane. But the next, we participated in the next mission to Balikpapan, and we did get all the way there to the target that time. And that was interesting to say. We did have fighter escort in that mission. And how could this be? Well, by the time that mission was flown, we had acquired a base that I think it was located at Sansapor on the far western tip of New Guinea. And by practicing P-38 to power settings, rehearsing them over and over again, and we had a civilian advisor over there at that time that was helping us on that, and that was Colonel Lindbergh. He held a reserve commission, but he was strictly in the capacity of a civilian. the government wouldn't let him into the armed forces. They thought he was more valuable as a civilian advisor. And he showed them how to extend the range of the P-38 by using droppable fuel tanks and carefully adjusting the fuel settings for every phase of the mission. And they were able to give us fighter escort over I think it was the third and fourth final missions over Balikpapan, Borneo. And when we came in on that mission, and when we landed, the ground crew told us, "Do you know who flew fighter escort for you today?" Colonel Lindbergh. He wasn't supposed to do that. He was supposed to be just strictly as a civilian advisor, but that came as a surprise to us. And he had done that quite frequently, we understand, that he'd taken a P-38 and flown combat missions, and they told us he shot down a Zero that particular day. So our next, and this was, that was a very important target to have taken out and neutralized. I don't know whether we neutralized it completely, but we did curtail the Japanese fuel production that they were getting there. They used the bunker oil. They could put it right into the bunkers of the ships, and without any further refining and the fuel their naval vessels and so forth. And of course, they had the refinery there to refine it into aviation fuel for their Air Force. Our next hop was up to that island of Morotai, where we'd made the emergency landing on our first turn back from Balikpapan. And first there were just 2 squadrons of us that moved up there, the 23rd and the 72nd. The 72nd was our squadron, and the 31st and the 394th followed later. And we were there only a couple of days, and they told us our target would be, at the briefing, would be Alicante Airdrome on Negros Island, which is about 2 islands east of Leyte, where MacArthur's forces had just landed. And this island of Negros was heavily fortified with Japanese airfields all around the island, and our job would be to neutralize those airfields by cratering the runways to keep the Japanese from using them to harass the newly landed forces in Leyte. So we flew against this field, Alicante Airdrome, I believe it was located on the east coast of Negros Island. And there was fairly heavy cloud cover that day, and we didn't pick up the target on the first pass, nor even the second pass. We finally found that the clouds had cleared enough so we could pick it up on about the third pass. I think the 72nd actually went in first and got our bombs out, and the 23rd was behind us. But by that time, the Japanese had plenty of time to get 25 or 30 airplanes up there in the air to start harassing us. And we finally got our bombs out and were on our way home, and they followed us for about 25 or 30 minutes, and making typically frontal passes on us. They'd fly outside of our gun's range alongside the formation and get up ahead of us, and then turn back in, and making frontal passes from anywhere from 10 o'clock around to 2 o'clock level. And they made pass after pass at us, and as soon as they would turn back in within range of our guns, we'd start firing at them. And I can still remember the plane coming at us, and I could see the smoke coming from his wings, and I mentioned on the interphone to the other gunners, that's good, guys. I think you're getting them. And well, it wasn't. I don't think that was necessarily hits from our airplane. Those were the guns of the Japanese fighter firing at us, not only with 7.7 millimeter machine guns, but with 20 millimeter cannons. And when they fire these 20 millimeter shells, if they hit you, they explode, and you get additional shrapnel and damage to the airplane from them. I think our gunners got one probable that day, and we picked up a few holes, and I think one of our vertical stabilizer, and one of them greased right across the top of one of the wings. But we kept a good tight formation, which is the ideal defensive measure in a formation like that concentrates all your firepower and takes a pretty brave fighter pilot to come in through that intense 50 caliber firepower. You have 4 dual turrets on the plane and 2 hand-killed waist guns, and that gives you 4 times 2 is 8, plus 2 more. That's 10 50 caliber guns. We had 7 planes in the formation then, so you got 70 guns firing at at the incoming fighter planes. Unfortunately, the 23rd following behind us didn't keep it. Apparently, didn't keep it too tight a formation. The lead plane was pouring on the coals to get the heck out of there and get home, and some of his wingmen couldn't keep up with him, and the Japanese fighters began to pick them off, and we lost our best friends that day. The pilot of this crew, Sanders, had gone through aviation cadet training. In fact, he had enlisted from the same hometown in Texas as my pilot, Terry Spivey. And we were real close to this other crew, and we didn't learn until we got home that they had been shot down. And they were hit by a Japanese fighter plane that crashed right into the front of the plane. We don't know whether he was a kamikaze or whether he was out of control, and or either the pilot might have been dead or his plane was out of control. But anyway, he crashed right into the front of the plane. A couple of the waist gunners in the back miraculously escaped. All they knew is there was a big explosion. The next thing they know, they were floating down, and Japanese planes continued to make passes at them to try to shoot them down while they were floating down in their parachutes. And they landed in the water, and no sooner landed in the water than Filipinos had put out in outrigger canoes and came paddling out there and picked them up and took them ashore at a safe area and moved them up and down across mountain ranges and to the southern tip of the island, where keeping them constantly away from the Japanese strongholds. And we had an escape station on the south end of the island that was held by guerrillas. And when it was safe to pick up survivors or crew members that had bailed out there, they'd run up a flag, and we'd have a PBY Catalina or sometimes a submarine that could actually come in there and close by and pick up survivors and bring them back. But that was probably the scariest mission we had from fighter planes. After that, we began to get. We didn't have fighter escort that particular day on that mission, but we began to get fighter escort. After that, it was either P-47s or P-38s. I preferred to see the P-38s because if there was a weather front on the way between our home base and the target, you could generally count on the P-38s getting through there. The P-47s apparently weren't as stable a platform for instrument flying, and the pilots generally had to turn back if they encountered heavy weather. But it was good to see either one of those planes. It was nice to have them there with us and zigzagging back and forth over our formation as we approached the target. They had to do that, of course, to slow down there so they wouldn't outrun the formation that they're protecting, being a faster airplane than our bombers. I guess the next most scariest, well, probably the scariest mission we flew altogether was to Brunei Bay, Borneo. This took place on about this. I remember the date exactly. It was the 16th of November, 1944, and our reconnaissance aircraft had spotted Japanese naval vessels over there. They thought there was just maybe a battleship or an aircraft carrier, and this was following the intensive battle of Leyte Gulf with our Navy. But one whole segment of the Japanese fleet, I think it was the half or a third of the Japanese fleet at that time, limped off down to Brunei Bay to regroup and refuel and get ready for the next engagement. And we didn't realize until our formation approached how many ships there were there. We could see all these ships, and we could see these puffs of smoke coming up. What's that? They couldn't be shooting at us already. We're still about 14 or 15 miles away. And about that time, there's an intense anti-aircraft burst right at the front of our formation and knocked the lead plane and another B-24 out of the sky. And after that, somebody gave the order, well, everybody for himself pick a target and make a run. And so we, as we got closer and closer to the target, and we attacked them at a murderous altitude. We were around 9,000 or 10,000 feet, which is just about right for their. Of course, as we got closer, they couldn't elevate those big deck guns, but they had a lot of smaller guns that they were just filling the sky with flak. And I guess it would be best described if you can imagine what it would be like flying an airplane through a 4th of July fireworks celebration, the grand finale of the 4th of July fireworks. And of course, in the 4th of July celebration, there'd be a lot of different colors. Well, there were a lot of different colors here, too. I don't know whether, I think my theory was that the different ships had different colors and their anti-aircraft bursts, and maybe that way each ship could identify their bursts and make corrections to get the targets, which was our airplanes. And I guess I would say I never prayed so hard in my life as I looked out there. Oh man, we're never going to get through this. They had our altitude exactly. They're bursting right in front of us. And you can hear the old tried expression that we say, "If you could get out and walk on it." Well, that was literally true here. All of a sudden, there was one burst right in front of us, and this was a burst that it lighted up the sky because we learned later, it was full of little pieces of pipe that were filled with thermite powder, which is a mixture of aluminum and iron oxide that is commonly used for welding. It burns at about 1600 degrees. And when this thing burst, you see all these sparkly, silvery things, and we flew right through one of those. And a couple of them came right through the instrument panel on the left side of the cockpit and hit my pilot in the stomach. But fortunately, his flak vest was there to save his life. He made a big dent in the flak suit and set the fabric on fire, knocked his wind out, filled the cockpit full of smoke. And Terry turned to me, he called me Willie. He says, "Take over, Willie, I've been hit." So it's my job to fly that airplane for a minute or two until he recovered and took over. And I don't know I don't think we might have scored some near misses with our bombs, but another plane in our squadron that had broken away from the formation and picked out a Japanese cruiser to make a run. The bombardier put the crosshairs on the target, and when the indices came together on the bomb site and were supposed to start the bombs going away, he noticed that the bombs weren't going away. There was a malfunction either in the sight or in the intervalometer that was releasing the bombs, so he immediately hit the salvo lever, and he got 5 direct hits of 1,000-pound bombs on this cruiser. And it was later confirmed that from other ships in the formation that plane those hits did sink that cruiser. And I think we did damaged some of the other bombs from the formation damaged a battleship. So I think we lost about 6 or 7 airplanes on that mission. Every one in the formation, of course, was damaged. Some of them were losing fuel and had to bail out on the way home. One of them had to bail out we had to fly back over Borneo, of course, the jungles of Borneo, and one of the crews in particular had to bail out over Borneo. He had to abandon the aircraft because of its damage. And they landed in the jungle and were picked up by native headhunters. And these native headhunters hated the Japanese and were actually hunting Japanese heads about that time. But they kept our fellows on the move. They knew where the Japanese were, and they kept them on the move, kept them away from the Japanese. And they lived with these guys that had to bail out, lived with these native headhunters for several months until Australia was finally liberated by Australian forces. And so I'd say that was the scariest mission we had. A lot of them were just milk runs, but I guess we had probably 8 or 10 missions where we did encounter fighter cover or severe flak. Maybe a little more than that, maybe half of the missions, 15 or 20 missions. And we had a lot of close support missions where supporting ground troops where they'd lob an artillery shell and say to drop your bombs here and so forth. But about halfway through our missions, we were sent to, turned out it was December of 1944, we were sent on rest leave. We were sent to Australia.
Okay, go ahead.
We were sent to Australia, Sydney, Australia for rest leave about halfway through our missions. This was December of 1944. And we were put up in Red Cross hotels in the King's Cross district of Sydney. We were only supposed to be there about a week, but when we got time for us to go back, we'd go down and check in every day, and they'd say, "Sorry, fellas, no transportation. They're using all of the C-47 cargo planes up north to land troops up north of northern part of Luzon, and then Guyan Gulf. They're using drop paratroopers and so forth." So that was tough. We would have to go back and spend another day out on Bondi Beach or Mandai Beach, the beautiful white sand beaches they had there in Sydney. So I finally, the transportation came through. We got back up there and got back in. And by this time, the action had moved up into to the northern part of the Philippines, up around Manila. And our troops were approaching to take Manila, and we supported them by bombing Nichols and Nielsen fields near Manila and Cavite Naval Base. We worked up. We were lead crew about this time, and we were leading squadron and group formations over Manila area and Cavite Naval Base. We destroyed every building on that Cavite Naval Base, which was kind of built on an island jutting out from a peninsula on the south side of Manila Bay. We also bombed Corregidor prior to our troops landing on Corregidor and softening it up. And this was about the end of my missions. I'd reached my 40th mission about this time, and we'd already moved up into the Philippines. We were located in Samar Island, and so I was relieved. Finally, it was over, and I was sent back to the United States. And I had a night. Most of the crew came back on troop ships, but I was fortunate to be flown back by the Air Transport Command on a C-54, which was the DC-4. The civilian version was the DC-4 cargo plane at that time, or passenger plane that the airlines were using. And that was real nice. I was fortunate to be made a courier and given some secret documents that had to be delivered to Hickam Field in Honolulu, and they told me that as a courier officer, those documents that assured me a straight through trip. I couldn't be bumped. Even General MacArthur, they told me couldn't bump me on that flight. So that was my ticket home. And as soon as I got back home, after a short processing in Salt Lake City, I was sent to. I had my 2 weeks leave of absence, and I went to my hometown, and I married my fiance in her parents' backyard right there in Fallon, Nevada. From there, we honeymooned. Our first night of our honeymoon we spent in Reno, Nevada, and then we came down through Monterey, Carmel. We spent a day in Carmel, California, and then my orders were to report to Santa Monica, where the Air Force, the Army Air Corps had taken over 3 hotels right down on the beach in Santa Monica, the Edgewater Beach and the Grand Hotel, and I forgot what the name of the third one was. And they were processing returnees at that time, giving us a physical and bringing our dental work up to date. And surprisingly, they told me I had enough brownie points, I could go home. The war was over. This was May of '45. It had just been concluded in Europe. Hitler had just been defeated. Of course, it was still going on against the Japanese. And this kind of caught us by surprise because I was first lieutenant with flight pay, and pay wasn't too bad, and good chance to accumulate some money toward going back to school and getting my education. And we kind of wanted to do a little traveling at Uncle Sam's expense, so we elected to stay in for the duration. And where'd they send me? They sent me to Big Spring, Texas, where I flew. It was a bombardier training school, and I checked out on the AT-11, the twin-engine Beechcraft trainer that was used for bombardier training, and flew bombardier trainees. Now, we weren't training any more American bombardiers at that time. We had all we needed, but we were training Chinese nationalist cadets, and there was also a group of French cadets there. And they made, after we pilots checked out in the AT-11, we were also given a course on the Norden bomb sight, which was what the bombardiers used to drop the bombs. And in the bomb sight, it did this through in the airplane, it did this through the automatic pilot. The bombardier actually flies the airplane when you're on the bomb run. And they gave us a course on how the bomb sight worked. And I found that quite interesting and thought, gee, it'd be fun to own one of these someday. And I wished I'd bought one right after the war. I could have picked one up, probably war surplus, for about $20 or $25. I finally bought one about 5 years ago, and I set it up to demonstrate how it works with the ground simulator, which is completely portable, and I can take it to air shows, reunions of my World War II groups, and to schools, to classrooms. And anyhow, I finally I finished. The war was over. They dropped the atomic bombs, and the war was over. And jettisoning the fuel. We were stuck with jettisoning the fuel, but we we thought, well, why drop these bombs? It costs the government a lot of money. Let's save Uncle Sam some money. Well, we might as well bring those bombs back. And so we landed at Biak, called for landing instructions, and came in and landed. And we taxied into a parking apron, and we called the tower and asked them for to send out an armament crew to take these bombs out of the airplane. The operations officer in the tower said, "What? You landed with bombs? Well, I wouldn't have been up in this control tower if I'd have known that." You idiots. So anyhow, they sent the crew out there, and they took the fuses out of the bombs first, and then they put a mattress underneath the bomb bay, and they dropped the bombs, triggered the bomb shackles, and dropped the bombs one at a time out onto this mattress. And there were supposed to be special RDX bombs or something, very super sensitive, very dangerous bombs. And so we still, of course, it was probably foolish to have done that because we were risking a B-24 bomber, which is worth about $300,000, and the training of all those 10 men and the crew and any other people on the ground. But we did save the government some money. We brought those bombs back to be used again against the Japanese. Yeah, that was. While I'm at it, I might tell you about the time we were taking off from Nome for, and I had to get up during the night on the early mission, raining cats and dogs, and we taxied out to the takeoff, and there were a few planes ahead of us in takeoff position. One of them had taken off, and because of the water on the runways and everything, he apparently didn't gain enough airspeed, and that plane crashed into the water out beyond the end of the runway and exploded, blew up. The whole crew was, of course, instantly died and crashed. They waited a few minutes, and then they signaled for the next plane to take off. He got off. He managed to get airborne. Next plane took off, and it didn't go into the water too. And we often theorized maybe he caught a downdraft from the air currents around that other plane that was burning out there. And then there's two burning B-24s that had just taken off. And guess who's lined up to take off next? Our plane. So we waited for a few minutes, and pretty quick the control tower called us and told us they'd canceled further takeoffs and taxi back to the revetment area, and they would give us further instructions later in the day, which turned out to be a secondary or tertiary target. We would go to bomb that after after the storm had died down and the runway was safer to take off. Let's see what other experiences. There was a time I remember one time when we took off from WWII Island. The runway ran the length of the island, and we were having trouble keeping the pilot was having trouble keeping the plane lined up as we were going down the runway. One minute he'd be heading for the control tower, and he'd try to compensate for that, and as co-pilot, it was my job to watch the engine instruments, and particularly the manifold pressures, which were set at full boost for takeoff power. And I noticed that number 3 manifold pressure the needle was fluctuating wildly, and that was an indication there was something wrong with our turbo supercharger. So I said, Terry, we got a runaway turbo supercharger on number 3. First he had full boost and then nothing, and so he had to make an immediate decision: are we going to get this plane off the ground, or should we? Which sometimes is possible on 3-inch, but not likely with a full bomb and gas fluid. So he immediately chopped the throttles, and both of us started getting on the brakes, and we stopped just short of going into the water at the end of the runway. And we turned off the end of the runway, and the smoke was just billowing from the brake pads and those landing gears, wheels. So that was kind of a close call, and it took some fast thinking on Terry's part that whether to abort that takeoff or not. Let's see. Anything else?
How did you feel when America first entered the war, when you first found out?
Well, I guess we were mad as hell, what they did to us in Pearl Harbor, and we were quite complacent. We thought we had pretty powerful forces, and it would only take a few weeks. I could hear people, even fellows in our Japanese and our the U.S. Navy were saying it'd give us a few few days against the Japanese. We'll take care of them. And it was, came to everybody's surprise. It was going to take longer than we expected. But of course, the big thing there was the whole country was just so solidly behind our armed forces, and that was a good feeling to, you know, to be in the armed forces at that time, to know that you had plenty of backing in the home front. It was a total all-out effort. All civilian production was stopped. There was no automobile production was stopped, except for vehicles that were made for the services, and they converted to full wartime production. There no refrigerators or radios. This, of course, was before television. Radios, electronics plants that were making radios were converted to manufacturing radio sets for the military and radar gear. And on the home front, they even they felt that I think development of synthetic rubber was in its infancy at that time, and we were still relying heavily on natural rubber from rubber trees, and this was in the area of the world where the Japanese had already overrun the Indonesia, and where rubber tree plantations were grown, and so there was a massive effort on the home front to salvage rubber, old tires and everything, even down to the water bottles, rubber tubing, anything made out of rubber was taken to a central pickup area, and metals, salvage of metals, anything that could be used in the war effort.
How did the war affect you emotionally?
I found it to be very maturing. I guess I turned from a boy just out of high school into a mature adult. I know when I joined our crew, even our other crew members, the other officer members of our crew, had kind of doubts about this young kid that was going to be the co-pilot of that crew. Did he have the maturity necessary to be a crew member? And I matured very fast, I guess, and solidly. And since my pilot, who's still living, and I see quite regularly, he tells me, "You turned out to be the best darn co-pilot I could have hoped for." And I have similar feelings about Terry. I can think back many times when your quick thinking brought us through. So kind of a mutual admiration society, you might say.
If you could describe the war in just one word or a couple of words, what would it be and why?
Well, I'd say, let me say this. In the early part of my training, it was a wonderful experience. I did most of my training in Southern California. I enjoyed the flying, and it was fun. I had an early interest in airplanes as a youngster, and here was a chance to fly these big machines, and didn't have to worry about the cost. Somebody else was picking up the tab for the instructors' fees and the fuel and fly these planes. It was a happy time in my life. My high school girlfriend, she left school. She had started the University of Nevada with me, but she left school, and since it looked like I was going to have most of my training in Southern California, she and her sister moved down to Southern California, took an apartment out in West LA, and that way I was able to come in from the nearby bases where I was training and see her every weekend. And she was the love of my life, and it was fun to have. The love of my life was flying during the week and to see my girlfriend on the weekends. And when it was later on, as the time approached when I'd be going overseas, it began to get a little scarier. The news had been quite sobering, especially in the European theater, where they were losing as many as 60 airplanes, particularly on the Schweinfurt raids, tracking the bearing factories in Germany. That's a pretty sobering thought, to lose that many airplanes on a single mission. And it wasn't going too good in the Pacific either. There was heavy losses. And so it was, I'd say, the best described in my overseas experience was scary. And we not only were at risk when we went out on our missions during the day, but the Japanese had a habit of attacking us every night, generally about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We'd have air raids, particularly on the island of Morotai, in the Halmahera group. There were Japanese airfields nearby. In fact, they were attacking us from the main island of Halmahera, just across the bay, and they would come over every night to attack us. They were primarily going for the airfield, but we were bivouacked out on the peninsula, maybe 4 or 5 miles away from the airfield. But we immediately built a foxhole by digging an L-shaped trench and covering it with coconut logs and sandbags, and not only to protect us from the Japanese strafing and bombing, but also to protect us from our friendly fire from our own 90-millimeter anti-aircraft guns, which were firing straight up, and when those shells would explode, all that shrapnel would be coming whistling down through the trees, and so we needed that protection for our own friendly fire. So it was initially I wasn't as frightened as later on. Even on milk run missions, you begin to worry about things. Looks like I'm going to get through this thing, and be able to come home, marry my fiancée, and so even a milk run, you saw a flak burst hundreds of yards away. Maybe it would look much more scary than at the beginning of our missions. So does that kind of answer your question?
Knowing what you know now, would you go back and do it again still?
Well, yes, I would. I don't think I could do it in my present physical condition, but if I were a boy again, surely I'd do it. I don't think I could pass the rigid 6-4 physical. That's what they called it. It was codenamed 6-4 physical, the eye examination. Of course, you wouldn't even wear glasses in those days. You would automatically, if you needed glasses, you weren't air crew material. And no, physically I couldn't do it, but mentally I would do it.
Is there a message you would like to give out to younger people?
Well, I guess the message, and I guess you see this going on today in Iraq. First time we've ever, I think, been involved in a preemptive war. It's an attempt to prevent what happened in World War II, where we let Hitler and imperialists in Japan get so far in taking over other countries. And apparently we felt in our intelligence we showed that this could happen, and they could build another 9/11 on us if we didn't make this preemptive strike into Iraq. And it's somewhat disturbing for me to see the people that are demonstrating against this war. I can understand their feelings. I even have mixed emotions about it. I'm appalled at the losses on both sides, but we've got to support those troops. I'd hate to see the same thing happen to the poor fellows that fought that lengthy Vietnam War, and my heart goes out to them, how bravely they fought in those jungles down there, and didn't have the full support of the country that we had the luxury of 100% support during our war. That's my message.
As a wrap-up, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Well, I've, years after the war, I went back and got my education and was involved in primarily in the aerospace industry. I worked for an electronics company that manufactured electromechanical, electromagnetic components for the aircraft industry. And I never thought much about World War II in all those years. But now that I'm retired, my message is I'm trying to carry it out by going back to schools and talking to the kids in the classes, and I want them to know what it was like in World War II, and I think the teachers that we work with in this respect have been very cooperative in letting us come into the classrooms and get our message out. And that's the best way, I think, to carry it out, bring our memorabilia in. And my famous Norden bomb sight that I've built into a demonstrator, I bring that into the classrooms. Most kids today never even heard of the Norden bomb sight. I'm able to show them one and demonstrate how it worked. And it was a top secret weapon we had during World War II, almost as secret as the atomic bomb, would you believe? It was so secret that the bombardier had to guard it with his life and keep it locked in a vault during the night and carry it out in an enclosed satchel out to the airplane, installed at the airplane. It wasn't even left in the airplane overnight. This was about primarily in the early part of the war. Later on, we knew that some of these fallen into the enemy hands. In fact, it's now known that Germany had spies in the Norden bomb site plant and had complete plans for the thing. Had they chosen to make a copy of it, but apparently they didn't. They felt they didn't need. They had other bomb sites of their own that they preferred to use. But yeah, that's the message I'd like to get across. What it was like then, and I'm very pleased with the response we get. I think, I tell you the truth, I think we got another great generation coming on right now. Thank you.
I think that's all we need, unless there's anything else. I think we got it.
Okay. Now, we set up the...
Bombardier to pilot, bombs away. Bombardier to race centers. Watch for those bomb hits in about 20 seconds. And have that camera ready to go. Then let's get the hell out of here before those enemy fighters come up after us.
Straight in the Norden bomb site here. We're on target for this island out here. Closing in now. Well, you can see these indices here. When they come together, it's bombed away. Well, the index on this side represents the sighting angle. And this one is drop angle on one side. Right here. It'll start this intervalometer going on the side here, which in the original airplane that sent signals to the bomb bay to release the bombs. Coming up, it's close to bombs away now. As soon as they come together right now.
Bombardier to pilot.
Hear the bombardier's voice.
Bombardier to race centers. Watch for those bomb hits in about 20 seconds. And have that camera ready to go.
Take a look at the
Then
intervalometer
let's
here.
get
You
the
see the
hell out of
intervalometer
here before
flickering
those enemy
right here.
fighters come up after us.
This is releasing the stores from the bomb bay. There's the bomb hits coming now on the target, signified by the laser dots. Now we're killing the bombs. I like that island there. It's very similar to WWII island. For the island. I say this island that we just bombed, very similar to the airstrip we were on WWII off the coast of the. Here's a good target coming up out here, Osama bin Laden. Try to get this guy right between the eyes. See, I set the intervalometer to that. Yeah, all set. Indices coming together again. This represents the drop angle, and this is the sighting angle. The sighting angle is gradually moving up toward the drop angle. When they coincide, it's time for bombs away. Trips a little switch in here that starts the intervalometer going to release the bombs. And this demonstrator, it triggers the bombardier's voice coming on, telling the pilot it's bombs away. Getting close now. Won't be long. Moves a little faster as it gets up close, as this index approaches the other index. Okay, there we go.
Bombardier to pilot, bombs away. Bombardier to race centers. Watch for those bomb hits in about 20 seconds. And have that camera ready to go. Then let's get the hell out of here before those enemy fighters come up after us.
This shows the voltage going to the gyros. This is the current drain. We have about 28 volts here, and right now we're drawing about 3 amperes. It draws a heavier current when it's first turn them on, but after they get up to speed, the current drops. The 2 gyros and servo motor and everything, and the rate motor drawing just about 3 amps. When I turn off the rate motor, it drops a little bit here. Get ready for another bomb run. We have to bring this back, release that switch, the arming switch, and bring this back. Excuse me a minute. I'll put this back. And I have to... Yeah, we're making a run on the dam now. Okay, we're locked out of the dam. Quite a ways out. Here's the sighting angle and the drop angle, so that's how far we have to go till it's bombs away. Moves relatively slowly at first, but as we approach the target, picks up speed, goes faster and faster, so we're directly above the target and bomb release. This shows the rate motors running. It's driving a little disc in there, and when you make adjustments with these knobs out here, it positions a roller on that disc. It's close to the center of the disc. It goes at one speed. As it gets out closer to the outer periphery, it goes faster and faster. But anyhow, you make minor adjustments on that speed with this knob here. This is the search knob where you pick up the target, and this is the rate knob that if the crosshair drifts one way or the other, you make minor adjustments on that. And these are the course knobs that control the vertical crosshair right or left. The whole bomb sight is clutched to this horizontal gyro assembly to give us the horizontal reference plane. Take one last look here to see if we're still on target. Yeah.
Bombardier to pilot, bombs away. Bombardier to way centers. Watch for those bomb hits in about 20 seconds. And have that camera ready to go. Then let's get the hell out of here before those enemy fighters come up after us. Make a run on the airfield this time. Here's the crosshair on the airfield out there. That's about where the 2 runways intersect. Bombardier to pilot. Bombs away. Bombardier to wing centers. Watch for those bomb hits in about 20 seconds. And have that camera ready to go. Then let's get the hell out of here before those enemy fighters come up after us. Bombardier to wing centers. Watch for those bomb hits in about 20 seconds. And have that camera ready to go. Then let's get the hell out of here before those enemy fighters come up after us.
Island with the airfield coming up. Select that as the target. Turn on the rate motor, set the arming switch, and we started our bomb run. But we're pretty much on target. Like we're about 5 or 6 miles away. Approaching at the rate of 160 miles per hour. Sighting angle, and it's the dropping angle. The sighting angle index approaching the dropping angle index. When they come together, it bombs away. That looks pretty good. As far to go, since this index coincides with this one, I think there's a little switch in here. Send signals to the intervalometer, which sends signals to the bomb bay to release the bombs and train. Almost time for bombs away, coming up right now.
Bombardier to pilot, bombs away. Bombardier to waste center. Watch for those bomb missiles in about 20 seconds. You have that camera ready to go. Then let's get the hell out of here before those enemy fighters come up there to us.